Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. We just passed 290 subs. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, and I hope I can continue to make great content you guys will enjoy in the future. Now, the Week 10 AP Top 25 poll in college basketball is out, and I'm going to go over the top 25 rankings and see what I think about them this week. Houston is now the number one team yet again. They were number one earlier in the year, but then they lost. But now they're number one again after Purdue loses. And Houston's been playing great basketball this season, and they only have one loss. And they won against SMU, and they won at Cincinnati this past week. And they have a really good shot to stay the number one team for a long time because they are now in the American Conference schedule for the rest of the season, and there's a really good shot that they can win all those games. Now, they could slip up somewhere, but if Houston keeps winning, they will probably retain the number one spot, unless the AP voters think that Kansas winning enough impressive games in the Big 12 is good enough to surpass them. Kansas is number two, and they won at Texas Tech, and they won at West Virginia this past week, and Kansas has been very impressive this season. They only have one loss, and if Kansas keeps playing well and they don't lose, and they keep racking up impressive wins in the Big 12, they definitely could become the number one team, or if Houston slips up. But for now, Kansas is barely at number two. Purdue's at number three, and they lost against Rutgers this past week at home. That was a tough loss. Rutgers has beaten Purdue 2 years in a row, and Purdue is the number one team. So Rutgers has definitely been a thorn in Purdue's side. But then Purdue won at Ohio State, and they won at Penn State to make up for that for the rest of the week. And Purdue has only one loss. They've been very impressive all season, and Purdue can definitely move up back into the top two spots if Kansas or Houston loses and Purdue keeps winning. Alabama's at number four, and Alabama won against Ole Miss, and they won in dominant fashion over Kentucky at home this past week. And Alabama only has two losses, and they're playing great basketball this season. Brandon Miller is a fantastic freshman, and Alabama, if they keep playing well in the SEC this season, they can definitely continue to stay in the top five. Tennessee's at number five, and they won against Mississippi State, and they won at South Carolina this past week in dominating fashion. Rick Barnes, he has his team playing great basketball. Tennessee and Alabama are definitely right now at the top of the SEC, and they definitely deserve to be top five teams. UConn's at number six, and they lost at Providence, and they won against Creighton this past weekend. UConn only has two losses. They were both tough losses in the Big East, and UConn, beside those two losses, they've had a great season so far, and they played great basketball this year, so they're definitely a top 10 team. UCLA's at number seven, and they won against USC this past week. They're rivals, and they only have two losses. And Mick Cronin's team's been playing better and better. They did struggle against USC a bit, but they still won that game. And if UCLA keeps playing good basketball, they can definitely stay in the top 10. Gonzaga's at number eight, and they won at San Francisco, and they won at Santa Clara this past week, but they did struggle in both games. So there is a pretty good shot that Gonzaga could drop to St. Mary's potentially in the West Coast Conference or another team. But Gonzaga, if they keep winning, they will stay in the top 10. But Gonzaga definitely has struggled a little bit compared to what they usually do. Arizona's at number nine, and they only have two losses, and they beat Washington this past week. They did struggle against Washington, and then they lost against Washington State. That was a tough loss. They did not play well in that game, and Arizona's had two games this year they've played bad. The Washington State lost this past week, and they lost at Utah. But beside that, Arizona has been a really great team this season, but Arizona's going to have to be a bit more consistent and not have any more of these bad performances, or Arizona definitely will not stay in the top 10. Texas is number 10, and they lost to Kansas State, and they won at Oklahoma State this past week. Texas is having a bit of turmoil right now going on with the firing of Chris Beard, but Texas is continuing to play decent basketball. But they did play Kansas State in a game where their defense was not playing well, and both teams were putting up a lot of points. But then they won at Oklahoma State in a defensive slugfest. So Texas has been a bit inconsistent lately, but Texas is still a top 10 team for now. Kansas State is at number 11, and they move all the way up from unranked to the number 11 spot for winning at Texas and winning at Baylor this past week. Kansas State with Jerome Tang at head coach, they have been so impressive this year. They have been playing fantastic basketball. Keontae Johnson returning to the floor, playing at Kansas State after he missed a couple of seasons of basketball due to a scary incident where he collapsed on the floor at Florida. He is playing fantastic, and it's great to see. And Marquise Noel is having a great season as well. Kansas State is playing great basketball, and they have definitely been one of the biggest surprises in college basketball with Jerome Tang at head coach in his first season. Xavier's at number 12, and they won at Villanova this past week. Sean Miller has Xavier playing fantastic basketball. They only have 3 losses this year, and they're all to really solid teams. And Xavier's playing better and better, and if they keep playing the way they are, they can definitely move into the top 10. Virginia's at number 13, and they lost at Pittsburgh, and they won against Syracuse this past week. And Tony Bennett has a solid team, but they have been struggling a little bit lately. But if they keep winning, they can definitely stay in the top 15. Iowa State's at number 14, and they move up 11 spots as well. They're the other big mover in the Big 12 besides Kansas State this past week, and they won at Oklahoma and they won at TCU this past week. Both were fantastic wins. And Iowa State has been another surprise team this year because a lot of people thought they would take a step back after the great season they had last year and TJ Otzelberger's first season as head coach. But Iowa State seems to have carried that over to this season, and they're playing really well. Arkansas is at number 15, and they won against Missouri, and they lost at Auburn this past week. And Arkansas is banged up. Trayvon Brazil's out for the season, and Nick Smith, he's been banged up. And Arkansas just has not been the same team they were at the beginning of the season. But if Arkansas can get as healthy as they can by the end of the season, they could be a really dangerous team come tournament time. Miami's at number 16, and they lost at Georgia Tech this past week. And Miami's been playing great basketball this season. Jim Larinaga, he has the Hurricane playing a fantastic brand of basketball. Their guard's been playing really well, but they did struggle against Georgia Tech, and Miami has been a bit inconsistent, and they don't have a lot of elite wins, but Miami still has looked like a solid team this year. TCU's at number 17, and they won at Baylor and lost to Iowa State this past week. TCU's been playing much better basketball right now with Jamie Dixon at head coach than they were at the beginning of the season when they had some injuries, and they lost that game to Northwestern State. But they've been playing a lot better, and they were undefeated beside that Northwestern State loss until now, losing to Iowa State at home. That was a tough loss, but it is just one game, and TCU's still playing really solid basketball this season. Wisconsin's at number 18, and they beat Minnesota at home, and they lost at Illinois this past week. Wisconsin did not have Tyler Wall in that game against Illinois. That was a tough loss, but Wisconsin's still been playing pretty good basketball this season, and Greg Gard always has Wisconsin playing consistent basketball. Providence is at number 19, and they were a big mover this past week as well. They won against UConn and St. John's at home this past week, and they move into the top 25. This was a fantastic week for Providence. It's really getting their confidence built up coming to Big East play. And they're playing really well right now, and if they keep winning, they can definitely stay in the top 25. Missouri's at number 20, and they stay in the same spot as they were last week, just like TCU did. And Missouri lost at Arkansas, but they were able to beat Vanderbilt at home this past week. And Missouri's been a surprise team as well this season. Dennis Gates has his team playing good basketball. And if Missouri keeps playing well in SEC play, they can definitely stay in the top 25. Auburn's at number 21, and they lost at Georgia this past week, and they won against Arkansas as well. Auburn's been up and down. They've had some bad performances this year, but they've also had a few games where they've actually shown the talent and the potential that they have. And Bruce Pearl, if he can get Auburn to be more consistent, they can definitely stay in the top 25 or potentially move up. Charleston's at number 22, and they won at North Carolina A&T, and they won against Delaware this past week. They only have one loss. Charleston's been playing good basketball this year, and they do deserve to be in the top 25 right now unless they slip up in conference play. San Diego State's at number 23, and they won at Wyoming this past week. San Diego State has 3 losses, but they have a pretty good resume overall, and all their losses are to really good teams. And Brian Dutcher has San Diego State playing at a very high level, and they can definitely stay in the top 25 if they continue to win in the Mountain West. Duke's at number 24, and they lost at NC State, and they won at Boston College this past week. Duke struggled this week. They did get the win over Boston College, but it wasn't pretty. They only won by 1, and they really struggled against NC State in that loss. But Duke has a lot of talent, and if John Shire can put all the pieces together with all the talent that Duke has, Duke will be fine and definitely move up higher into the top 25 than they currently are because Duke has a lot of talent. They're just struggling a little bit right now. Marquette's at number 25, and they won at St. John's, and they won against Georgetown this past week. Shaka Smart is Marquette playing great basketball. They have 4 losses, but their resume is really solid. They've beaten a lot of great teams this year, and if Marquette keeps playing the way they are in the Big East, they can definitely move up into the top 25. So that rounds out the top 25 poll. And the teams that dropped from the top 25 rankings, Indiana, Baylor, New Mexico, and Ohio State, they all lost their games this past week, but they could definitely move back into the top 25 if they start winning again. And the other team votes, Baylor, Clemson, Florida Atlantic, Indiana, St. Mary's, Michigan State, Northwestern, Illinois, Mississippi State, Rutgers, Ohio State, Creighton, North Carolina, NC State, LSU, Pittsburgh, New Mexico, and Nevada. All these teams are really solid teams, and some are just struggling with injuries like Indiana, or some are just struggling with inconsistency like Baylor or North Carolina, but they could definitely move back into the top 25 if they start playing better or if a team can get healthy and start winning again because all these teams are pretty solid. So that is the Week 10 AP Top 25 poll in college basketball. The rankings are really starting to shake out now that we're in the thick of conference play. You're really starting to know which teams are really good and which teams are not in college basketball. It's going to be really interesting to see how the rankings shake out moving forward. Comment down below what you think about the Week 10 AP Top 25 poll in college basketball and whether you think the AP voters got it right. and whether you think some teams rank higher than lower than what you previously expected going into the season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below, and I will see you next time.